saving you having to read, one of these big background books by Danny Kahneman or someone, but I use a piece of paper basically to illustrate the entire literature. So if I take a split of paper and I tear it in half, those who've seen this before. So I'm going to show you what people are good at and what they're not good at. And you can see, hopefully this is relevant. So I take the first bit and I scrumple it up. I'm going to need a volunteer who's going to catch it. You ready? Or someone who's very good, thank you. Oh, we're going to go behind you. Oh, perfect, it doesn't matter. It's so good and effective. So if I say to you, how do you do that?
I put my hands up and caught it.
Sounds really easy, doesn't it? Of course, it's phenomenally complicated. If something's moving to you in space, it's actually ambiguous about where it is in space. You've got to work out how heavy it is, how fast it's moving, where is it going to be. You have to anticipate that, move your hands perfectly in sync, and then catch it, right? But we can't build a computer or a robot to do that yet. But we take it totally for granted. Amazingly good at certain kinds of things, which you do basically without thinking. So you can tell me in outline terms, but in fact, to unpick it is quite hard. If I take the other half of this paper, though, and you have to bear with me. Imagine I could fold this in half, which I've just did, and then fold it again, and then fold it again. I carry on doing that. Imagine it's difficult to do it in practice, but I did that 100 times. Imagine I did that 100 times. The question is, how thick does it become? Million miles? You're getting sort of ish. It's billions of light years. So it's roughly, if you think not just the solar system, in fact, the entire Milky Way, about 10 times thicker than the Milky Way, or wider than. So it's billions of light years thick. It's a very simple calculation. You can do it in a few moments with a calculator. It'd be the thickness of the paper, right? And then times 2 to the power 100. We're really rubbish at it. It's an exponential function. Well, the world actually is full of it. Investment decisions have exponential functions in them. We don't intuitively do them. We're not very good at it. So I'll just show you very briefly, short history. It's not that governments have never done this before. In fact, you guys have been nudged. You're nudged all the time. A very simple, everyday example of it is white lines in the road. This is one of the earliest white lines in the road, put in Dead Man's Corner in the US in 1919. Someone had a great idea. These cars kept shooting around the corner and hitting each other. Well, how about putting this line in the middle of the road with a big arrow? You can say, go on this side, not the other. We started to do this ourselves in the UK in the early 1920s, starting in Manny Corner outside Birmingham. Turns out it's really effective. In fact, when you and I learned to drive, the highway code was advisory. It's a really good idea, go on this side of the road rather than the other. And a lot of it still is. If you read it, some things it says you must, and some things it says you should, because it's not necessarily in law. Now, you could be done for dangerous driving, but if you can see, basically, it's full of nudges. Cat's eyes, lines on the road, they're sort of giving you a clue about what you're supposed to do, and they work pretty well. So the most basic thing is these very simple nuts and bolts changes, which turn out to be very consequential, and I'll just show you a few of them. Using a very simple framework, we sometimes use EAST. If you want to affect behavior, make something easy, attractive, social, timely. I'll just give you a very simple example on the first, which illustrates it, because people think, oh, maybe it would affect whether I pay my tax on time or something, but just changing a tax letter, adding one line saying 9 out of 10 people pay their tax on time, does this. Say most people in your area pay their tax on time, goes up a bit more. If we say, you are one of the few people who've yet to pay your tax on time, madam, even better. And if we say, most people in your area pay their tax on time, and you're one of the few yet to do so, they're up there. This is for one line on a letter. You can get a difference like this in terms of repayment rate. It can be playful. Here's one from Australia, actually, which is just get people to take the stairs more in Southern Cross Station. They just put a big picture on it. Led to a more than 100% increase in the number of people taking the stairs. They kept it there for a month. There is a really sad end to the story, actually. It's so effective. It was then bought as an advertising space for a large drinks manufacturer. Anyway, here's one which my colleague on the political side, Steve Hilton, also used to love, which is, it's not just these things are effective, they have a different character to them sometimes. So this is some work we did in job centres, getting people to turn up. And we noticed that quite often, someone we booked in, we know that we send them a text to say, you've been booked a place for this job interview at Tesco's or whatever, the weekend, it's job fair. Only 1 in 10 people turn up. If we add a name, so it says Matthew, you've been booked a place, it's on the same text. If I add my name, so it's Matthew, you've been booked a place, David, this is how many turn up. And if we add one more line, which is to say, Matthew, I've booked you a place, good luck, David, 27% turn up. So it's not just that, of course, it's more effective, but think about how do you feel receiving that text, and how do you feel when you walk into the interview, feeling that actually someone has done this for you. Because good lab evidence suggests you're more likely to get the job, in essence. So one, future for is this nudge stuff? This is UCL, but of course Orwell. Is it, Ministry of Information, 1984, very scary? Well, it could be, or we could use it well. And it's rather important, I think, myself, that we involve the public. And the last thing I think for us is, do you move from these nuts and bolts issues, for many governments now using these things, is what about the really big challenges that face a society? Almost always they involve human behavior and so on. It can be about how markets operate for consumers, right? Particularly in an electronic and e-world, right? Incredibly sensitive to these sorts of things. In terms of climate change, right? It's about human behavior. What can you do to change people's behavior? Or in relation to obesity, pretty big issue still. Or what's happening in a classroom or in a home, or issues of trust in markets. If you think about some of the biggest issues about driving growth are so-called animal spirits. They're about what you think other people are doing, essentially by psychological facts. But also conflicts occurring across the world and so on. It ought to be that psychology and behavioural insights has something to say for these big issues. And if it's the case that economics and a lot of essentially prior assumptions about many of our political models were wrong in their core heartland, right, and we can get these better results, then why aren't we applying it more generally? And I think, for me, that's one of the key challenges in the years to come.